Hi, Miriam. Hello.
Surely these intelligent, smart women, how could they be taken?
Or in the case
My shear is going to start. I don't have to. Menchie said, the guy said around to do the digging this morning, and Menchie said, now I'm not sure what, I said to him, he said, what time should he come around? I think.
Morning.
Good morning.
Morning, Rabbi Brill. Can you mute yourself? Can you mute yourself, please? I can hear you.
I spoke to him yesterday. I think his mobile number. I rang him.
Can you mute yourself, please?
But I think he told me.
Good morning. Sorry, slightly delayed.
Good morning.
I'll go over. Start in one moment.
Please mute everybody.
Claps. There we go. Good morning, everyone. Sorry for the delay. Public holiday and Duffy got me rolled over a bit. Okay. So today we're going to be dealing with Parshat Tzav. When you're ready. We have enough copies in the room? Okay, excellent.
Rabbi Brill, can you mute everybody,
Sorry,
please?
sorry.
Can you
Sorry.
mute everybody? Because I can hear.
I'm going to mute everyone. I can't mute everyone in the room. I can mute everyone out on Zoom. Okay. Okay. Well, a lot of people here, a lot of people on Zoom. Excellent. Okay. That's. I'm just going to share screen. But there's always room for a couple more in person. So we'd love to have more people back. Here we go. I'm going to share screen. Sorry. Okay. Do you know where the remote is, Debbie? Okay. Oh. All right. Well, I'm going to begin. Okay, I'm going to begin now. Okay. Good morning. Sorry. I teach year 9, so I'm used to it. All good. Okay. So this week, Parshat Tzav, we continue our discussions with the various korbanot in the Avodah in the Mishkan. And again, Parshat Tzav is largely technical, and there are a lot of things which sort of repeat themselves from Parshat Vayikra. We have a repetition of you have to go closer to the right, though. Be where you did is. You have to be right across. You have to stand in the other corner. Yeah. Oh, no. So we have the repetition of the korbanot, but this time it's in a different form, and largely the focus is not so much about what the korbanot themselves are, but rather what the kohanim were performing at what they themselves have to do. And this sort of gives rise to various little chidushim, novellae regarding exactly what the kohanim themselves are doing in the avoda and exactly what it is they represent. And a lot of that comes to the forefront in our parsha in Tzav. So let's begin with the opening psukim of the parsha. Torah tells us the opening psukim by Deber Hashem Shalima. Hashem spoke to Moshe as follows: Tzav et Aharon, right? Aptly named Tzav, command Aharon ve'et banav leimar, his son, saying, Zot Torat ha'olah. This is the law of the olah, right? The burnt offering. Hi ha'olah al mokdah. This is the olah on the literally on its fire, on its burnt place. Al mizbeach, on the altar. Kol halayla ad haboker ve'esh tizbach. It should be the entire night. The olah is supposed to burn the entire night on the mizbeach, and the fire is supposed to be on the mizbeach throughout. But it doesn't stop there. It gives us some details about the kohanim themselves in Pasuk Gimel. But lavash hakohen midovad, the kohen should wear his linen shirt, umichnesei vad yilbash al basaro, and should wear linen pants on his body, on his flesh, literally. Veherimet hadeshen, and he shall raise the deshen, the ashes. Asher tochal ha'esh et ha'olah al hamizbech v'samo et al hamizbech. So there's this ritual in the morning of the Trumat Hadeshen, literally the lifting of the ashes of the mizbech, where a kohen would come in the morning and would scoop up some of the ashes from the fire from the previous night's korbanot, which had been burning, and then would move it off of the mizbech. That's the Trumat Hadeshen. The Torah then tells us in Pasuk Dalud, ufashat et gadav, then the Kohen will then remove his clothes. V'lavash b'gadim acherim, or will wear other clothes. Interesting detail. And then he would take this ash, basically the removing of the ashes off from the Mizbeach outside of the camp to a makom tahar, to a pure place. And then the Torah emphasizes that the fire should constantly be going on the Mizbeach, it should never go out. And again, each morning the Kohanim would add more eitzim to stoke, more wood to stoke the fire each morning. And then would perform. La'aruch literally means, like in Monhim, means to edit, it means to lay, to organize. Like a Shulchan Aruch is a set table, right? So he would literally set the ola on the mizbech, and then the fats of the shlamim offering. There should be a constant fire on the mizbech. It should never be extinguished. So there's interesting details here just about the Kohen. Firstly, we have some details about the Kohen that it for some reason only gives us 2 of his begadim. It tells us about his shirts, his pants. It doesn't tell us about all of his begadim. Sorry, and that's point number 1. And point number 2 is that between the different parts of the service, it's supposed to
Wonderful. Well,
Why don't you get it?
why does that? What the question is? Why does he? There's 2 things. One is that he changed. One is just in general the first time emphasizes that he wears clothes, and the second time is then he changes. So Ramban deals with both points separately. So first, let's deal with why it is that the Torah mentions that he had to wear these begadim, his clothes on. We know garments, and here it mentions specifically 2. So first, he quotes Rashi at the beginning. We have Lavasha Kohen Midovat. So Rashi says, "Here kotonet," right? That's the kotonet, the tunic, the shirt. Umal Taman Loma Mido. Why does it call it Mido? His midah. Shetehei kamidato. That it should be like his midah. In other words, it should be like his measurement, meaning it should fit him. Al basaro, and it also tells us that he should wear the michne sevad will be al basaro, literally on his flesh. Says Rashi, shelo yehei davar chotzetz ben time. There shouldn't be a chatzitza. There shouldn't be something interrupting between. It should be directly on. He shouldn't be wearing them on top of his regular clothes. Well, that's yes, but the drasha is that it's also to do with midah, meaning measurement. Midah is in like a size. You have, as of midah, what size do you want? So that's right, and also the idea of midot is supposed to be attributes to fit us. But yes, so it's really to do with madim, right? But the drasha here is that it's also supposed to be like midah, like it's supposed to be the right fit. So Ramban expands on these 2 points of Rashi. Lashon Rashi says that's the end of Rashi's quote. In the second paragraph, Ramban says, "V'hinei behold, trumat hadeshin tzricha bigdei kuna." Even just the emptying of the ashes off of the altar, that requires bigdei kuna. He has to wear the kohanim's garments. Ve'ein avodah b'shnei begadim. And even though the Torah only emphasizes here 2 of the begadim, there's no such thing as an avodah just wearing 2 of the begadim. So why did it mention that? Just these 2. So it says Ramban. Aval hizkir eile hashnayim. It mentioned these 2 begadim specifically. L'davar shenitchatesh behem kam, or l'daber b'nitchatesh behem kam, to teach you 2 chidushim basically regarding. That's why it mentions these 2 things, to teach you some chidushim regarding these 2 garments. That's why these are singled out here. Firstly, regarding the ketonet, the tunic, the shirt. Lomar is to teach you shetehei ketonet kamidato, like Rashi had said. It's supposed to be fitting to his size. It's supposed to be his size. Va'inyan lomar, the idea of saying this is sh'im hayim wasulakin or ketsarim, if they were like too loose or too short. Ve'inan magim ad raglav, right? The pants they were more like shorts, like. But if they didn't cover most of the leg, va'avad behem, and he did the avoda in garments which didn't fit him. Avodato psula, the avoda is puzzle. It's not valid. So it's ma'ak, what we call in halachic terms, it's ma'akev, right? That the avoda, it has to actually, you have they're inherent to the actual avoda service. And even if he's wearing the wrong Kohen's garments, puzzle, avodato psula. That's why it emphasizes midah or mido, which Rashi is making a drosh about midah. There has to be the right size. These are the Kohen's.
More than 2.
Yes, there were 4. There were 4. So why does it mention it? The other 2 was the avnet, the belt, and the mitznefet, the hat, turban. So, and the Kohen Gadol had number 4, obviously. So that's why it mentions that one, the midah, because it's supposed to be the right midah. It's supposed to be the right measurement. V'lamad the second din that singles out the pants to tell you they should be al basaro, literally on his body, that there shouldn't be a chatzitza, anything between himself and the clothes. Who are din, and similarly, In other words, that was a special din which it teaches he wears only the big day kahuna. You can't wear them on top of his own clothes. Who din, and similarly says Ramban, shesricha kol big day kahuna. It requires all of them. Kivan shehiskira katuv shesricha bagadim. So once we anyway know that he's supposed to wear the bagadim, we learn like consequently meaning once we start talking about bagadim here, then it's clear that he has to wear the entire set. So Ramban thinks there was no hava a minute, there was no thought otherwise to say that he was only going to wear two. But these specifically were singled out to teach us dinim halachot about each of them, namely that they're supposed to fit him. And it's fascinating to think if he wore bagadim which was a bit too short or too loose, the avoda is psula, right? It's not valid because it's an inherent part of the avoda that he's wearing the big day kahuna. And the other one is that they're so important that this is the only thing. You can't wear them on top of his own clothes. But this is what he's supposed to be wearing, and only these garments when he's doing the avodah. No coats, right? No coats. But hopefully on the Mizbeach it was pretty warm. So snowing in Yerushalayim. Yeah. Well, they had everything. I mean, it was all typically kept in the mikdash. So I think they're pretty good. So question number 2 was that the Torah emphasizes ufashat et gadab, right? That why is it that it emphasizes this, right? We said that firstly in Pasuk Gimel it said lavasha kohen midovadra, he wears these things, and then Pasuk Daled that once he's removed the ashes, with the fork off of the mizbeach and put them next to the mizbeach, next to the kevesh, next to the ram, then he's supposed to remove them v'lavash b'gadim acher, and wear other garments when he takes the desha and the ashes of the outside the camp, when he basically empties the mizbeach. Now, why is that mentioned here? And there's Rashi and brings one suggestion, and Ramban brings something different. So let's look at Daled there in the Ramban. Ufashated b'gadav, he should remove his clothes. Says Ramban here, quoting Rashi, Ein ze chova ele derech eretz. It was not a halachic obligation, it was just derech eretz, just the way of the world. Shelo yelachlech b'gadim shemeshemesh b'hem tza'at hadesha. He shouldn't dirty the clothes which he uses when he takes out the desha and takes out the ashes. That he shouldn't basically get his big day kahuna dirty. So it was derech eretz rather than a formal chova, a formal obligation. And he brings the following analogy: b'gadim shebishel b'hem kadeira l'rabo, al yimzog b'hem kos l'rabo. The clothes with which a person cooks, his master's food, he should not, go out and be the butler with pouring the wine to his master in those same clothes. In other words, the cook does, you wear your cook's apron and then you take it off and then you wear your nice things when you become a butler, right? That's why it says b'gadim acherim. You should wear other garments when he takes them outside of the machaneh. P'chutim mehem. The b'gadim p'chutim mehem. They're like the less fancy ones. Lishon Rashi. That's Rashi. It's like in the army you have in the army, I had my Madei Aleph and my Madei Bet. You have your fancy uniform that it's really uncomfortable. I can tell you firsthand experience, but it looks good on buses, right? It looks better, yeah. Better pressed, but then when you're on the base, we don't wear that. When we're out on the shooting range, we're wearing Madei Bet, right? These are the begadim p'chutim. They're the work clothes. You get filthy, the ones that you used to get your holes in. So there were 2 things. No, so we're talking about in the morning service that once he's removed some of the ashes, like symbolically from the mizbeach or trumat hadeshen, then he would actually literally empty some of the mizbeach, and that would have when he would exchange and then take them all the way out to the machaneh when he's schlepping the deshen. Sorry, it's another set. Well, so that's the question. Begadim acherim seems could be interpreted in multiple ways. Right now it says p'chutim, so it's another set of clothes, but they still seem to see big day kahuna, right? Maybe it wasn't the Mahudra ones, but they still seem to be big day kahuna here, nonetheless. Yeah, but you can't compare the dirt of the blood of the mizbeach to the ashes which are being basically disposed of, so to speak. I think that's the thing. Yeah, but of course, the Kohanim on a day. Imagine, Erev Pesach. Think about, getting Pesach, Erev Pesach, the amount of, the Korban Pesach. The hundreds of, thousands of, sheep. Being, they used to have like literally production lines of the Kohanim standing, passing the blood around. It wasn't the cleanest affair. But sorry, yeah, 100%. But people who were there to make the Kohanim clothes because it was constant changeover, right? So. Seriously. So, but that's Okay, so Rashi says here that he would change into lesser clothes, and Rashi says rather being a formal obligation, it's at what he calls derech eretz, and that's also quoting the Midrash. And Ramban then the third line says, "La kavanah l'rabbeinu b'zeh," the rabbi's intentions in this is to say, "Lomar," to say, "Shehotzat deshen tzricha bigdei kahuna." Chazal is saying that even though you change, nonetheless you still have to wear bigdei kahuna. You can just wear regular clothes, but they have to wear the Kohen's clothes. Ve'ein begadim acherim bigdei chol, and the phrase begadim acherim, other garments, doesn't refer to mundane clothes, bigdei chol, but it actually means just different bigdei kahuna. But that was after he said Lashon Rashi. Different bigdei kahuna, but not the ones that he would wear, right? Not the same quality. Or certainly a separate pair, which were designed to be more dirty, basically. Yeah. Says Ramban though, that might be what Chazal were emphasizing, but I don't understand why Rashi says it wasn't a chova, it wasn't a halachic obligation. And that's the next paragraph. It begins aval. Aval lo yadati, but I don't know, says Ramban. Minayin amma harab she'ein chova. Where does Rashi get this from? That it's not an obligation to actually change. Kinireh, because it seems, says Ramban, shemitzvah hi al kohen, that there should be a mitzvah on the kohen. Shehabagadim sheyaseh lehem hakorbanot, the begadim with which he performs the korbanot, gam haramat hadeshen, including the lifting of the ashes, which is the first stage, which he did with the regular garments. Yiu begadim nikiyim, should be clean clothes. Lo yishamesh behen ba'otan asher hotzi hadeshen. He should not do the avoda with those with which he used to schlep out the deshen. And it's still a mitzvah, even if it's derech musar, like the way a servant would serve their master and they would switch clothes. It's still a mitzvah, and he doesn't understand why Rashi says it's not a chova, but it's derech eretz. It still seems like it is a mitzvah. And therefore, the kohanim would have the nice, the choicest garments la'avodot for the avodas, right, when they actually perform the avodah inside the mishkan. And the less quality garments lotzat hadeshen, for taking out the deshen. This is all according to Rashi's shita, Rashi's opinion, which is that we're assuming that they still had to wear the bigdei kahuna even when they took the deshen, when they took the ash out of the mishkan. The assumption is that when it says bagadim acherim, it was two. And he says, even according to Rashi, I don't understand why you're saying it's derech eretz and rather than chova. Seemingly, if you think that you have to wear the bigdei kahuna and there's a command not to dirty, not to foul the bagadim, then that should be a chova on the kohen as well. Again, continuing this idea about the essential nature of the bigdei kahuna that we mentioned previously. Yeah. Interesting, but that's what it would seem. The question is, in what sense they were bagadim putim? In what sense were they really lesser? I don't know if that just meant the quality, or if it meant just by very nature of the fact that they were designated easy to wear, right, machine washable ones. But I don't know if that just meant that they were designed for that purpose. And he had the clothes which were dirtier because that's what he dealt with, taking out the ash basically from the mizbech. But this all is right. So that's why he entered those last words that we just read. All of this is lefia svara hazosh k'tzavah harav. This all points to the svara, the explanation that the Rav Rashi has said thus far. That we're assuming that we're still talking about bigdei kahuna, but just a different type of bigdei kahuna. He's going to say that not everyone agrees, and that's the next paragraph we're going to do. Yes, Deb.
This was kind of a rotating responsibility, wasn't it?
Yes.
So you might just get to do this once a year or a week.
Right, but the point is the kohen could, yes, it's a rotating responsibility, but the point is the kohen can't come back and then perform the avodah in these begadim. So it's interesting, it tells us that he should wear begadim acherim, should wear different ones, but that's more to teach us that when he comes back, he shouldn't be wearing the same ones, even though it tells us it prior to. It doesn't say and then get rid of them. It says switch into, from the outset, switch into the lighter garments, basically, the lesser garments, the begadim pchutim, and then switch back out of them when you get back to do the avodah. But we're going to see now what Debbie said, which is that not everyone agrees that begadim acherim necessarily meant that they were bigdei kahuna. We say in the what? It doesn't say. No, but what's their explanation? Our explanation is why did you change? So that you shouldn't make dirty the garments which you then use, which you use for the avodah. why not make them dirty once I finish the oven? So clearly it meant that the issue is because he's then going to go back and serve in these garments. Put this right, keep them on. So the whole point is he change, right? He changes to special garments which he wears to take out the ash, to take out the deshing, and then change back into the regular ones.
Collecting the ashes, that's when he gets dirty. When he's taking it out, probably in a container, and then he's not going to be dirty. So
Right, but it means the whole Sa'ami is literally the taking out for this bath, right? That's where he gets dirty, but already there he's changed. That's the point. There's two things. There's the Trumat Hadeshen, where you just lift the ashes. No, that's just like a symbolic word. Then there's the actual Hotza'ah of the Deshen. And that's where, look, if you go back to the Psukim, right, already in 3, he wears his garments in Pasuk Gimel, the Heirimit Hadeshen. I told you, it sounds very complicated, very technical, right? The Heirimit Hadeshen, he should lift up the ashes. That's what we call Trumat Hadeshen. We just take some of it and they put it to the east of the ramp. That's not in the Psukim, but that's what the Gemara says. Why? I think it's the idea of sort of well, firstly, you can't leave the ashes forever piling. The Mizbech at some point is going to get full. But I think the first one is the Trumat Hadeshen is symbolizing the fact that it's a new day's avodah, like out with the old, in with the new. But technically, only in Daled, when he's actually emptying, like collecting the ashes and emptying out of the Mishkan, that's when it says only in Daled, Ufashatet b'kadav. He takes off these clothes of Bilvash b'kadim achirim. What we're going to see now in the final paragraph is Ramban has assumed, though, or Ramban claims Rashi has assumed, this is all according to the opinion that b'kadim achirim also means big day kahuna. I mean, I could have thought I've done the Trumat Hadeshen, I take it out, and then when I actually scoop it up and take it out the machana, out the camp, maybe I don't actually need big day kahuna at all. Rashi just says it's b'kadim pchutim. But lesser garments, but not everyone agrees. So let's look at the final page, the final paragraph on the page. So it says Ramban there, that was all what Rashi assumed, that it's 2 types of big day kahuna. Aval, but final paragraph. There are those of our rabbis in Yoma, Omer, who say, big day kahuna. But no, it's only the Trumat Hadeshen you have for the Gatin. But when it says that he takes off his clothes and wears other clothes, it doesn't necessarily mean the big day kahuna. The Omar, and it's saying, when the pasuk says he should wear bagadim acherim, other clothes, big day chol, right, mundane clothes, regular clothes. And Ramban says, pshuto shel mikra b'kachtu. That's the pshuto shel mikra. She tzaveh alav, that the Torah is commanding us, shelo yilachlech big day habad, big day hakodesh potzat hadeshen. He should not make dirty the linen clothes, the holy clothes, when he takes out the ash. Aval, but rather yilbash big day chol. So there's already a machloket about it in the Gemara, which is why Ramban allows himself to say, well, the pshat, simple understanding is that bagadim acherim means that once you've removed it from the mizbeach, you can wear any bagadim. And bagadim acherim, according to Ramban, does not require big day kahuna at all. So Rashi is adamant and takes the opinion that still avoda at the end of the day. Whereas Ramban is saying, well, according to the pshat, the simple understanding, it's not really avoda. It's just you're just taking out what's already been removed from the mizbeach. Therefore, that did not require big day kahuna because it's not formal avoda. That's a little bit about clothes, just to start us off with. Now we have the korban mincha. And the korban mincha has a couple of interesting dinim. Again, we had mincha previously, but here we talk about the mincha once more, and we talk here again from sort of the Kohen's perspective. That's what Parsha Tzav is very much about, Kohen's perspective on the korbanot. So over the page there, korban mincha, the Torah tells us in Pasuk Zayin, V'zot Torat HaMincha, this is the law of the mincha offering. Hakrev ota b'nei Aharon l'fnei Hashem el pnei HaMizbeach, that the children of Aaron bring it close before Hashem to the face of the Mizbeach. V'heirim imenu b'kumtzo, and they lift from it a kmitza worth, misolet HaMincha, from the it's literally like a hand's worth. It's a hand's worth, basically. They do this thing with their fingers and they scoop it out. And this is this thing is called the kmitza, right? Because that's how they'd scoop it out, like a handful's worth from the flour of the mincha, umishamnam, from its oil, bet kol halavona, and also the frankincense, a she'al mincha, which is on the mincha offering, which is typically flour or matzot. V'hiktir hamizbeach reich nechach askarata l'Hashem. They should offer it up as a fine fragrance. It's more portion to Hashem. And the leftovers from it, Aaron and his son should eat. Matzot te'achel b'makom kadosh. It should be eaten as matzot in a holy place. In other words, the flour is supposed to be for matzot in a holy place, but chatzar ol moed in the courtyard of the ol moed yochlu. That's where they should eat it. Now, interesting because it's just coming up in just over a month. Lo teafeh chametz. The mincha offering was not allowed to be baked chametz. It had to be matzot and not chametz. Chalkam natati otam meishai. I have given it to them as their chelek, chelkam, their portion from my fire korbanot. Kodesh kodashim, he is holy of holies. Kachatat b'cha'asham. So the mincha offering was kodesh kodashim. In some sense, it was, and therefore it's only the Bnei Aharon who could partake of it. It had to be, it was not allowed to be chametz. Lo teafeh chametz. It's usher to make it chametz. The only korban that we actively say could be chametz, because the Torah tells us, and maybe we'll talk about that on Shavuot, is the shtei halechem. The korbanot on Shavuot, they're allowed to be chametz, right? So right, the Torah as well. But the Torah actually tells us explicitly, chametz teafena. It tells us in Parshat Emor, by the shtei halechem, that the lechem bread that they bring is supposed to be chametz. And then in contrast, because that's really when the completion of the process of Pesach is over. So you go from matzah to chametz. And at Korban Toda, that's why we don't say Mizmor Toda on Erev Pesach or on Pesach, because you couldn't bring a Korban Toda on Erev Pesach because you can't eat it that night because it's chametz. But the Korban Mincha was not allowed to be chametz. It was not allowed to be made into chametz. Why is it that the Mincha is being repeated here? So Ramban there straight away says, "V'zot Torah Mincha." This is the law of the Mincha. Hosifa Parsha Hazal. According to its simple understanding, they added this parsha here. Kfi pshuta arba mitzvot b'mincha. This parsha added, according to its simple explanation, 4 mitzvot, 4 important halachot regarding the mincha offering. One is shetehei ne'echelet matzot, that it has to be baked and eaten as matzot, that we already spoke about. Number 2, v'shetehei ne'echelet b'chatzar ohel moed. It had to be eaten in the ohel moed because it's kodesh kodashim basically. Number 3, right? All the male children of Aaron should eat it, and that's the din of any of the kodshei kodashim, just like the chatat offering. Only the kohanim could eat it. Anything which touches it becomes kadosh. So basically, the mincha offering adopts the properties of kodesh kodashim, which is the higher thing. So you had something like the ola, which is the ultimate extreme. The ola was burnt entirely on the mizbeach. Then on the other end, you have kodshim kalim. The other extreme, you have the lighter kodshim, things like the shlomim, right, which the bailim, the owners, were allowed to eat in Yerushalayim, right, not only the. And then you have this middle category, kodesh kodashim, right, the holy of holies, which was like the chatas and the asham, and now we've added also the mincha offering, which only the kohanim were allowed to partake of. So that's what's introduced here. Interesting, this requirement for chametz, or not the requirements that it must not be chametz, is not really expanded upon here. But I think again it's to do with the idea that the mincha offering typically represents your basic ingredients. It's supposed to be very sort of, I wouldn't say bland, but very basic. It's supposed to be the fine flour, and we see that symbol in different places about just the mincha offering being like a very basic thing, and therefore it's not supposed to be lavish, not supposed to be left chametz to rise or leaven. It's supposed to be just the basic thing, and therefore it's baked into matzot and matzot alone. But what about that other phrase that we saw in pasuk Yud? If we look back to pasuk Yud, it said lo tefeh chametz. It should the mincha cannot be baked chametz. Chelkam natati otam me'ishai. It is their portion I've given to them, me'ishai, from my ishim, from my offerings, from my fire offerings, literally. It's an interesting phrase, and Ramban picks up on it. What does it mean? Chelkam natati otam me'ishai. So Ramban there says in the next paragraph, Chelkam, their portion, natati otam me'ishai, I have given to them from my fire offerings. Well, Hashem's being quite protective here with the mincha. Me'ishai, it's my offering. So it says Ramban, Sha'af lechelek einam rishayim, or sha'af lechalek einam rishayim, ela la'acha masnot ha'ishim. Only once the komets, right, the handful has been given onto the mizbeach, only after that are they allowed to lechalek the offering. Only then can they split up the offering. In other words, the kohanim might think that they're privileged, that they can touch it, but they can only have it once it's the certain amount, the komets has been offered up on the mizbeach to Hashem, right? Ela la'achar matnot ha'ishim. Only after the ishim doesn't mean people, it means the esh, right? After the fire. And from here we learn to all the kodashim, dichtiv kodesh kodashim. because it says Kodesh Kodashim, Holy of Holies. So we actually learn out from the Mincha to all the other Kodesh Kodashim, like the Chatat as well. But the Korban Chatat also, even though the Kohen gets a portion, they were not allowed to even lechalek, to split up or to start working out who's getting what until they've done the service. And that's what the Torah is emphasizing here, right? Chelkam notati otam mei ishai. Hashem is saying, I give their portion to them, mei ishai, from my fire offerings, from my offerings. The Kohanim are partaking on what we call the Shulchan Gavoah. In the Gemara, we see this phrase a lot, the Shulchan Gavoah, literally the Shulchan of on high. The Mizbeach is the Shulchan Gavoah. It's God's table. It's God's table. And the Kohanim are partaking. There's a machloket in the Gemara, in Kiddushin and in other places, as to whether the phrase the Gemara uses, are the Kohanim, are they Shlichei D'Rachmana or are they Shlichei Didan? Are they the Shlichim of Rahmana, of Hashem, or are they Shlichei Didan, of Shlichim Shelanu? What is the ma'amad, the halachic status of a Kohen? Meaning, when we look at them, and there's also conceptual questions as to the Kohen. There's a question about whether Kohen's allowed to be mochel on his kavod. If a Kohen's allowed to forego his honor and as a Kohen and say, no, you go first, it's all right. And that's based on this question, says the Gemara. Are the Kohanim shlichei d'rachmana, the shlichim of Hashem? Are they representing in some sense that we give them, and they're like, what I guess other nations call the priests, right? They are we bring to the priests the offering, and they're representative of Hashem, or are they shlichei didan? They're our shlichim to Hashem in the avodah. And the Kohanim sort of have this middle ground that sometimes they appear to be the shlichim of Hashem, right? We give it to them, they literally eat the food for, like, whether they're eating it for Hashem or on Hashem's behalf. Or on the other hand, they're shlichei didan, they're our shlichim. We're sending them as our representatives into the mikdash. And the Kohanim are always sort of dancing between the two here. And what we see here, I think, is this another example of that sort of tension, which is that they're eating from the Kodesh Kodashim, but only once Hashem has partaken of it. Only once it's gone up to the Mizbeach. They're not just, they're in the Mishkan, it's their Korban. No, it's Hashem's Korban. And only once that portion has been given on this Mizbeach, only then are they allowed to start actually dealing with the Korban itself. And that's something which we learn out from the Korban Mincha, which is also something which the Kohanim are able to partake of. Now, when we come to the order of the Korbanot, things are very different to our Parsha compared to previously. In Vayikra, we went through the Ola and the Mincha, and then we had the Zevach. And only towards the end, which is like the Shlomim, basically, and the various voluntary offerings. And only at the end, till we go back to the Chatat and the Asham, the sin offerings, at the end of Parsha Vayikra. But here the order is different, because we have here, before we deal with the Shlomim, literally the peace offerings, right, the voluntary offerings, we first have the Chatat. So it's out of order here compared to what it was in Vayikra. And Ramban picks up on this. We see the psukim here in Vav Yud Zayin. Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe. Hashem says to Moshe, Daber el Aharon el Bnei. God speaks to Aaron and his sons as follows. Zot Torah Chatat. This is the halach of the Chatat, the sin offering. Bimkom asher tishachet ha'olah tishachet Chatat. In the place where the olah is shechted, that's where the Chatat is shechted. Lifnei Hashem, before Hashem, Kodesh Kodashim, it's holy of holies. So why is the order different? So Ramban there says in Yudchet, Zot Torah Chatat. Says Ramban, Hayahat Sivoy B'Seder Vayikra. The command in Parsha Vayikra was different. So I just said, Ola u'mincha b'zeh v'chashlamim v'chatat v'chatat v'ha'asham. So in Vayikra, last week's Parsha, the chatat and the asham are pushed to the end, whereas here the chatat comes before the shlamim. Why? Says Ramban. Why is the order different there? Keep it chila diber b'korbanot hanadava. Because last week's Parsha, first they wanted to do the korbanot hanadava, the voluntary offerings, the shlamim. And afterwards, then the mandatory offerings for sins. But in our parsha, it's the other way around. First, it clarifies the ola mincha, and afterwards, then it brings the halachot regarding the sin offerings, the chatat and the asham. Why does it do that first here? Because unlike last week's parsha, which is introducing us to the korbanot, here it wants to actually go into the finer details. Leva'er, to clarify dinei kodshei kodashim, to clarify the dinim, the halachas of the kodshei kodashim, and that's why it makes sense that the chatat is juxtaposed here to the ola and the mincha. Ki hamishpat echad lahem, because strictly speaking, they're all kodesh kodashim. They have the same halacha, mishpat echad, one law for them all. Mincha, just like it said in the mincha that we just read before, Kodesh Kodashim, he kachatat and asham, like the chatat and asham. Right, the mincha belongs in that category with those, and therefore, when we come to actually deal with the dinim, like we do in Parashat Tzav, it makes sense we bring the chatat and asham with them. And only afterwards, yuva'er din kodshim kalim. Only afterwards we'll deal with what we call kodshim kalim, the lighter holy offerings, namely the shlamim. We said the shlamim was special about it, that the Baalim could also take it and eat it in Yerushalayim. Right, in the Machane Yisrael, they could eat it. So the explanation for the differing order in Tzav versus Shmini versus Vayikra is that Vayikra we're being introduced to the Korbanot, the various stages, the Ola and the Mincha, and that which they bring typically every day, and then the voluntary offering, and then the Chatzat and Asham. Whereas in our Parsha, when it comes to Tachlis, what are the halachas? So we say, okay, we have the first group, which is called Kodshe Kodashim, and then we have the Kodshim Kalim, the more serious and stringent rules, and then we bring only the Shlamim at the end, whereas the lighter rules for the Kodshim Kalim, which is not as strict, because the Baalim, the owners, could also partake of that Korban. So there is a method, a logic to it, says Ramban. Okay, any questions? Good to go on? Okay, great. So, interesting, at the end of the Korbanot, there's this sort of throwaway two psukim. At the end of the Korbanot, it says as follows in concluding the listing of all the Korbanot in the next section. Zot HaTorah, so Zayin Lam Zayin, Zot HaTorah LaOlah, this is the law for the Olah offering, Lam Mincha for the Mincha, Lachatat L'Asham, V'Lam Miluim, and also the Miluim, which we didn't really get into, which is sort of the offerings, or the inaugural offerings for the Kohanim who are being inducted into the service. V'Lezevech HaShlamim, and to the Shlamim offering. Asher Tzivah Hashem et Moshe B'Har Sinai, which Hashem commanded Moshe on Har Sinai, B'Yom Tzavoto et B'nei Yisrael, on the day that he commanded B'nei Yisrael, L'Hakriv et Korbanehem L'Hashem B'Midbar Sinai, on the day that he commanded Israel to offer up their korbanos to Hashem in the wilderness of Sinai. So here seems to imply, where was the mitzvah given of Vayikra? When did Vayikra happen, or when was it actually originally given? It was given on Sinai, right? It says Asher Tzivah Hashem et Moshe B'Har Sinai. But then it goes on to say, on the day he commanded them about the korbanos at the Midbar Sinai. So it's not really clear. But the assumption is, and Ramban starts with this, which is that it was given at Har Sinai, and the Torah is just telling it to us now in the separate book of Vayikra, it was given at Har Sinai. And that's certainly what Chazal thought. And this is what Ramban starts with saying there in the last paragraph there on page 2. Asher tzivah Hashem et Moshe b'Har Sinai, which Hashem commanded Moshe at Har Sinai. Al derech Rabbeinu, according to our rabbis in the Midrash, it says, Kol ha-mitzvot ne'amru Moshe b'Har Sinai. We know that according to Chazal, all the mitzvot were said to Moshe at Sinai, on Har Sinai. Kolotenu fratehem v'diktukehem, both the general principles and the finer details and the absolute fine details. They were all given to Moshe at Har Sinai. V'nishnu mehem ba'ohel moed. And they were repeated, some of them were repeated, like Sheni, right? Nishnu, they were repeated in the Ohel Moed, in the Mishkan. V'hinei mitzvat vayikra shnuyot. And therefore the mitzvot of vayikra are shnuyot, they're basically just being repeated. Meaning the Torah is made a separate book called Vayikra, right? Torah Kohanim, Leviticus, it's all about the avodah of the Kohanim, what they're supposed to do. But of course, says Ramban, according to Chazal, it was already given and said to Moshe at Har Sinai. Ramban says that according to the Pshat, though, that may not be the case. So whilst Chazal say that all the mitzvahs were said to Moshe at Sinai and then repeated in the Midbar, some of them at various stops along the way, the Pshat seems to imply, though, says Ramban, that no, this is in fact the first time Moshe is being told of these mitzvot. So over the page there, Ramban says, V'al derech ha-pshat, but according to the Pshat, the simple way of reading the Psukim, shi'uro, shi'ur literally means it's measure, but when Ramban uses that word, it means the correct way to read the pasuk is as follows: Asher tzivah Hashem et Moshe b'Har Sinai, which Hashem commanded Moshe at Har Sinai, uviom tzavoto et bnei Yisrael b'midbar Sinai, and on the day they commanded them at Midbar Sinai, lahakriv et korbanehem l'Hashem. But what's Ramban done there? How's that different to the psukim? I'm going to make you guys have to turn back and forth, but how's that different to the psukim? So if you look at the psukim, it says Asher tzivah Hashem Moshe b'Har Sinai b'yom tzavoto, on the day they commanded Bnei Israel, right? Here he adds the vav, uvayom. In other words, according to the pshat, it's really two separate phrases that it's supposed to be read. It's supposed to be read as there we go. Okay, It's supposed to be read back over the page, right? Hold on. I have to go through that. Thank you. Excellent. Save me scrolling up and down. So according to the Pshat, it's supposed to be read, Asher tzivah Hashem et Moshe b'Har Sinai, the day he commanded Moshe, which is in addition to the day that he commanded Bnei Israel to offer up the korbanot. So let's see Ramban. And the second line there on the third page. He says, Ki tzivah b'miluim b'Har Sinai v'chein ba'olav ha'chatat. Really, there were two separate events here. He commanded some on Har Sinai and some in only now. It says Ramban again, the second line there in the middle, because he commanded the miluim, right, the inaugural offerings on Har Sinai, and similarly the Ola and Chatat were given on Har Sinai. Those were already mentioned, right? We already saw the Ola also. We spoke about the Korban Tamid. We saw that in the end of Parsha Tetzaveh. Like we know it famously that we would know about the Ola and the Korban Tamid from Parsha Pinchas. But it already appears also at the end of Parsha Tetzaveh. So that was already given on Har Sinai. However, says Ramban, unlike Chazal, Ramban says according to the Pshat, this is the change. V'tziva b'mincha v'asham v'zivchei shlamim b'midbar Sinai ba'ohel moed. Whereas the Ola and the Chatat already mentioned, the mincha and the asham and the shlamim were mentioned b'midbar Sinai in the wilderness of Sinai ba'ohel moed. They were given in the Mishkan to Moshe. They were not given already at Har Sinai. So if you go back to that pasuk, it's supposed to be, there's really some of them, there's really two separate sections here. Some of the korbanot were already known to Moshe from Sinai, and some are only given now. You're supposed to read it, Asher tzivah Hashem et Moshe b'Har Sinai, which Hashem commanded Moshe at Har Sinai, which refers to some of them. And also, B'yom tzavotot b'nei Israel, on the day when Hashem commanded Israel, l'hakriv korbanehem l'Hashem b'midbar Sinai. Because some were given literally on Har Sinai, and some were given only in Midbar Sinai. But not actually on the Har, but in the Mishkan, in the Midbar. And that is these other korbanot, which were not mentioned in the book of Shemot, like the Mincha, the Asham, the Shlamim. They were given later. So Ramban says, according to Pshat, it's not like Chazal's famous saying. Pshat seems to say that some of them are new. But Yitachen, and it could be, next paragraph there says Ramban, Yitachen, it could be, Ki hatam b'Har Sinai, that in fact, the whole reason it says b'Har Sinai doesn't literally mean it was on Har Sinai, but rather it means B'makom hazeh lifnei Har Sinai, at this place in front of Har Sinai. In other words, B'Har Sinai should not be read as on Mount Sinai, but at Mount Sinai, meaning in front of Mount Sinai, but not literally on the Har when Moshe was up the Har. V'hu ba'ohel moed, or rather inside the Mishkan. V'chen, and similarly, Olat tamid ha'asiyah b'Har Sinai, right? That was the end of that was Pinchas as well. The Ola, which is given, the daily Ola, which was given on Har Sinai. Ki einenu b'Har mamash. It wasn't literally offered on the Har, on the mountain. It was next to the mountain. They only started the Ola, the Ola Tamid, the daily Ola offering, in the Mishkan, right? Because it says, this is what you shall do on the Mizbeach. Right? It hadn't happened yet. It only happens once the Mishkan was built. And similarly, and they traveled from the Har of Hashem. It means from the area of the Har of Hashem. It doesn't mean literally they traveled from atop the mountain. Also, right in Parsha Devarim, when Hashem says Rav Lechem, it's enough from dwelling Bahar Hazeh. It doesn't mean on the mountain. It means in the area, the region of the mountain. So it could be, says Ramban, that Bichlal, the entire pasuk, never means that it never means that it was given on Har Sinai. It's referring to things which were given at Mount Sinai, meaning at the area, at the region in the Sinai desert. So that's really what it's about. But rather, the korbanot were not literally given, or certainly not all of them were given at Sinai. So what does it matter? So this is what Ramban deals with now. The reason for all of these differences is because Israel were encamped in front of Har Sinai, close to it. Dichtiv, as it says, right, as you know, famously, and Israel encamped there opposite the Har, opposite the mountain. V'sham amdu, and they stayed there. Ad nos'am misham lemidbar Paran, until they traveled from there to the wilderness of Paran. So they were there for a while. V'hinei asu ohel moed, and that's where they built the ohel moed. V'hikimu oto lifnei hahar b'mizracho, and they set it up in front of Mount Sinai to the east. V'sham itchilu ba'olat tamid, and that's where they started the daily olah offering. V'vashana hashenit, and in the second year, nitzdavu al tegalim, that's when they were commanded about the tegalim, flags, the camps that the different shvatim, different tribes were supposed to be in different areas, and that's obviously the beginning of Parsha Bamidbar. and they set up the Ohel, the Ohel Moed, the Mishkan, in the middle of the Machanot when they traveled. And therefore, Amar HaKatuv B'chan, basically they were at Har Sinai for a while, for the whole of the duration of the Vayikra, because in Bamidbar they're told about the camps. This is how you're supposed to all live. And therefore, says Ramban, Amar Katuv, the Torah tells us B'chan here, Kizot HaTorah LaOlah, this is the law for the halacha for the Olah, V'lachol HaKorbanot, and all the Korbanot, Shetziva Hashem B'Har Sinai, which Hashem commanded again at Har Sinai, the Yom Tzavoto B'Midbar Sinai, the day that he commanded them in the wilderness of Sinai. Yagir to tell us, Ki Haya B'Har Sinai Uva Midbar Sinai. To tell us it was at Har Sinai and in the wilderness of Sinai. Hodia, to inform us, says Ramban, Shelo Haita B'Har Mamash. It wasn't literally on the mountain, but Makom HaKavod, the place of glory, Shesham Diber Imo Aseret Dibrot, the place where Hashem spoke the Aseret Dibrot with Moshe. V'lo B'Midbar Sinai Acharei Shenaslu Milifnei Ha'ar. Nor was it just in the general region of Greater Sinai, where they traveled after they left the Har. Aval Haya B'Midbar Sinai. But it was in the Midbar Sinai, Lifnei Ha'ar, meaning it wasn't on the Har, but it was next to the Har, where they were encamped for at least a year. But Tchumo, within its boundaries, within the Tchum, right? V'karov lo, and close to it. V'sham Ohel Moed, and that's where they were. Just like we said at the very beginning, Vayikra, by the beginning last week's Parsha, Vayikra el Moshe, and he called to Moshe, Vayidaber Hashem elav me'Ohel Moed, and he spoke to him from the Ohel Moed. Hodia otanu ata makom Ohel Moed. Right now, it's telling us where the Ohel Moed was, because in Vayikra it just tells us that Hashem appeared to Moshe from the Ohel Moed and he called out to him, and we discussed that last week. Never tells us where the Ohel Moed actually was this entire time. Only now it's telling us it was Bahar Sinai, B'Midbar Sinai. In other words, it was next to Har Sinai, and that's where they were. Yes, they've been the entire thing. They haven't moved, and they don't move through the whole book of Vayikra. Only in the beginning of Bamidbar do things start to move. We know what happens in Bahalot when people start to move, and then things start to go downhill. But it's very clear from here that Ramban is stressing, and why is this so important to Ramban? Again, I think it's part of Ramban's big hashkafa that we've seen multiple times, that the Mishkan is supposed to be a continuation of Har Sinai. So if you like, the two, it's the replacement is built next to it, and they live there for a year. The Shekhinah moves from Har Sinai to Midbar Sinai to the Mishkan, and that's where it is. They are for a year. They sort of create this replica next to Har Sinai, and that's what moves off with them. So it's sort of like an overlap, if you like, that it moves from one to the other. There's a reason that Ramban is always putting the Mishkan with Har Sinai, because it very much so that they are camped. It's like the Shekhinah has moved from Har Sinai, and then comes with them, literally, and then eventually into Eretz Yisrael. And that's really what Ramban, I think, is emphasizing, which is why I wanted to bring it, because it's just really nice, like, puts Ramban together. Does Ramban talk about significance of Korbanot in our days? Not more than what we saw his day. Well, not more than what we saw last week in his Rambam bashing. Right? In his Rambam bashing last week, Rambam gives his sort of very sort of technical, black and white. This is to counter the other nations, and Ramban says, I don't like that, because that's what Reich Nichach Hashem is. That's a pleasant fragrance to Hashem, but we're giving an educational lesson. That's Reich Nichach means in some sense Hashem wants the Korbanot. He doesn't speak about it about sort of in today's sense, but he speaks about it that when Hashem offered the Korbanot, because we've seen this idea in Ramban before, he's a Kabbalist, this idea of like Ratzon Gavah, like the divine need or divine desire, that God also in some sense wants things and wants our service. And that's what they did. I don't think Ramban will dispute the idea that was the service of the time, and that's why they did it. We know, for those who were davening in the tent in the marquee on Shabbat morning and heard me speak. Yeah, so there you go. So I spoke about the idea that Ramban says, whereas Rambam holds tefillah as d'oraita. We've spoken before, Ramban is d'Rabbanan. Tefillah is d'Rabbanan for Ramban. It's not, and therefore the tefillot come in place of the korbanot. The whole thing is a d'Rabbanan enterprise. But for Ramban, by its very definition, you can't. Tefillah is something which comes from within. You can't mandate it, at least on a biblical level. You can't command people to daven to Hashem. Hashem can't command people to daven to him, because for Ramban, tefillah comes from within. It's different, perhaps, to korbanot. Although the whole thing is d'Rabbanan. Ramban, Nachmanides, right? They be very academic about it. Nachmanides says tefillah is all the Rabbanan, apart from tefillah b'eit sarah, apart from tefillah at time of need. That's the only tefillah which is deraita, or maybe tefillah which accompanies some of the korbanot and things like that. Sorry. That's an excellent question. That's for a different issue. When we get to, I know, but I know I had to go off tangent because of Debbie's question, which is just a general question. No, it's good. I'm blaming you. So all good. But for Ramban, tefillah is something which comes from within. So Chazal can say, okay, we have to daven every day, and they do, and it replicates the korbanot. So for Ramban, who takes that whole model, Chazal with Rabbanan tefillot, saying the whole enterprise is to in place of the korbanot. So in the korbanot, which Ramban was giving of ourselves, it makes a lot of sense. That's what I said in the marquee, that the whole point is that it's giving of ourselves. That's what we saw in Ramban last week, that it's in place of ourselves. I should be on this better. It's literally giving of ourselves. And that's what tefillah is for Ramban. It's giving of ourselves. Only Chazal can say, you can't give the korban anymore, so give it tefillah. Give of yourself. It really is what Chazal call avodah shebelev, service of the heart, as opposed to the service of the mizbech, service from within. And therefore it makes sense for Ramban. It can't, Nachmanides, they can't be the writer. Can't tell someone to give. That's what korbanot are, so it makes sense. It's like a continuation. So we find that continuation in tefillah, even for Ramban, I think. Okay, let's talk to end off. We spoke about Har Sinai sort of moving to the Mishkan and how that really comes to play in our Parsha. What about the Kohanim in the Mishkan? So there's an interesting halachot here that they really did sit there for a while certainly during the whole inaugural process of the Mei HaMiluim. And the Torah tells us as follows in Vayikra Chet Lamed Aleph, Vayomer Moshe el Aharon ve'el banav. Moshe says to Aaron and his sons, this is when they're being inaugurated as the Kohanim, Bashalu et habasar petach ol moed, cook the meat at the entrance of the ol moed, v'sham tofelu oto, that's where you should eat it, ve'et halechem asher b'sal miluim, and the bread in the miluim basket, kashet tziveti, leimar, as I've commanded, saying, Aharon uvanov yochlu, they shall eat it. And there's various halachot of the Mei HaMiluim, these inaugural days where they literally initiated into the service. And it says then, Lamed Hey, ufetach ohel moed teshvu yomam v'layla. The entrance of the tent meeting, you shall sit day and night. Shivat Yamim for 7 days. Ushmartem et mishmeret Hashem. You shall keep or safeguard the mishmeret, the watch of Hashem. V'lo tamutu, and you shall not die. Kichein suveti, because thus I've been commanded. Suveti is in the pual, as opposed to tziviti. So you're supposed to sit there, and v'lo tamutu, and you shouldn't die. What is it? But what does that mean? And you shouldn't die. Please don't die. It's not just a nice request. But it's almost like an implicit threat, right? Like, in other words, you're chayav misa, right? You're obligated to the death penalty if you leave. And Ramban picks up on this. It's not just like be there and please try and stay with us, for the duration of the Yemei Miluim. It's kind of a morbid joke. It's a morbid joke because we do know what happens on Rosh Chodesh Nisan Beis, or what happens at some point is that his sons do die. So Nadav and Avihu, next week Parsha, by Yom HaShmini. Well, I mean, I would, and if won't die ever, or during these, and if they don't do it, what's going to happen to them? Then they might just die. So you're saying it's a promise that they won't die of natural causes during those 7 days? That's the point. So it depends how you understand Teshvu Yomam V'Layla. Does that mean they went without sleep? Does it mean that they literally sat like day and night without sleeping? So in that sense, then it's like a guarantee that even if you're doing something supernatural, don't worry, it'll be okay. We know they were eating though, they weren't fast, but to be up for a week, it's much. It's also not clear as to what it means that they Leshevet doesn't mean to sit, but it means to dwell, right, as well. So it's not clear that it means that they stayed within the Mishkan perimeter, within the Klaim, within the curtains of the Mishkan. I don't know if they literally were up all night. But either way, let's see what Ramban says about this. So he brings the writer of the Midrash. So let's see Ramban there. Ufetach almo etesh v'yamam v'layla. You should sit in the entrance day and night. Shivat yamim for 7 days. Ushmartem et mishmeret Hashem v'lo tamutu. Shall safeguard the mishmeret, the safeguarding, the watch of Hashem, and you shall not die. Al da'at Braita Torah Kahanim, according to the Braita in the Midrash and Torah Kahanim, inyan hapasuk hazeh, the idea of this pasuk is Shelo yetzu mikpetach ol moed, yomam v'layla b'shat avoda. That they should not leave the entrance of the tent of meeting day and night, b'shat avoda, during the avoda service. Klomar, namely, ad sheyashlimu kol ha'avodah mutelet aleihem be'oto ha'eit. So according to that writer, it doesn't mean that they literally sat there. It means for 24/7, literally 24/7. But it means that while the avoda was going on, they had to be present at the petach or moed, at the entrance to the mishkan. They could not leave until until all the work which was incumbent upon them was completed at that time. Well, there it was 5. Yeah. Right, there were only 5 of them at that time. There was Aaron, Ella, right, and his 4 sons. Right, Pinchas didn't become a Kohen until later. Right, this is the right, exactly. This is the opening. They're now being inducted as Kohanim. So, according to that midrash, they weren't there the whole time. They were only there while the avoda was going on. What's the message? We are the Kohanim. We're in charge of it, and we're all in this now as a shevet, if you like, or as a family, and we're all responsible. And while the avoda is going on, it can't be that in this inaugural week, these Yimei Miluim, that some of us are out. We're all in the Mishkan, and we're all in this together as a family. It's not the individual. I think this is what Ramban's telling us, I believe. It's not the individual, but it's the family who are being, inaugurated and initiated here into the service. And therefore, as long as the avoda is going on, we're all here in the boundaries of the Mishkan. V'hi mitzvah noheget l'dorot. But Ramban goes further in the next paragraph. He says this is a mitzvah which is noheget l'dorot, which is practice for the generations to come. Shelo yaniach kohen avodah v'yitzeh. That a kohen can't just leave the avodah and leave. That if the kohanim there, they cannot leave while the avodah is going on. Chayavin alei amita. The chayav mita if they do. Who she'amar b'kohen hagadol. And that's by the way what it says before below tamutu. So he understands that in a bit of a more not threatening way, but in that sort of ultimatum. Yeah, consequences exactly. Chayavin alei amita, and they would want a death penalty for walking out on the avodah because it's them as a shevet or as a mishpacha that really who is doing the avodah. It's also rude. I agree. I agree. Someone gets up to Daf and Musaf and then everyone walks out, right? So that's speech, right? Or sometimes the rabbi gets up to give the drasha and then people walk out. It's not great, is it? So, if I don't know who's speaking in the tent this week, but I might tell people they're not allowed to leave the Moed when the avodah is going on. There we go. I don't know who's speaking this week. Yeah. Okay, say that again, Debbie. They did rotate, right? But the point is that you can't. When the avodah is going on, they didn't walk out. And he says, "That's what end off." That's why it says regarding the Kohen Gadol, "Umin ha-mikdash lo yitzei v'lo yichalel." Right, later on it says that he shall not leave v'lo yichalel. The Kohen Gadol should not leave the mikdash while the avodah is going on. V'lo yichalel. He cannot be mechalel. He cannot profane, right? Or make chulin my the avodah, right? The idea, in some sense, it's like it's rude, but it's an insult. But it's disparaging it. But more than that, it's turning it almost from kodesh to chol. Yeah, you're like the kohanim walk out on the avodah is not kosher in some sense, right? Amru, they said, Emotai eno yotze ve'eno machalel, have'omer b'shat avodah, right? Chazal say, when is it they're not allowed to walk out? As if they don't walk out, it won't be mechulal, it won't debase the avodah. That is b'shat avodah, when the avodah is going on. So that's how Ramban understands the idea. That basically, that they're not meant to debase the avodah by walking out. It's an affront, and it's rude. And it's not their choice. It's not their choice, but not only that, it's not their choice, but they as a family are now in part of the service. They're all in it together. So that goes back to what we said before, the Gemara and Kiddush, the Shlichei D'Rachmana, the Shlichim of Hashem, and not Shlichei Didan. They don't come and go. And it's always the tension of Kohanim.
Obviously, they're commanded to eat from the sacrifices, and that's
This
going
week.
forward. So does this mean that they don't eat man anymore, or that?
Well, it sounds like during this week they didn't. So it sounds like we're pretty busy. I suppose it depends if they were in there the whole week or they were just there for the time of the avodah. But
But that's what I'm saying. So from this week on, they're going to be sacrifices. all the
well,
time.
I suppose
They're
it
not
depends.
like-
It might not be enough to feed everyone.
There are only 3 of
It's interesting. There were only this week there are 5. Halfway through next week there'll only be 3, and then until Pinchas comes along, until they have kids. Yeah. So we don't know also which kids were born in the midbar as well. But yeah. So it is a full-on job. But, right, there's 3 of them, right? You ask the Gabaim, you ask the Gabaim here. So anyway, have a good day, and also a happy Purim to everyone for this week. Take care.